A few weeks ago, I had a really weird experience that has happened to me over and over. Out of nowhere, I randomly became obsessed with Pokemon again. I found myself looking up what Pokemon live in which environments, thinking way too hard about the kind of Pokemon I would probably own based on which Pokemon would probably live around the area I grew up in. I familiarized myself with the list of Pokemon from my favorite games, and I spent a lot of time listening to my favorite songs and themes from those same games. In the midst of this random spur of obsessive research that didn't actually mean anything, I stopped myself and, completely baffled, looked in the mirror and asked, why is this happening? What is it about Pokemon that has it re-entering my psyche over and over and over again? Why do I keep coming back to this world, and why, when I come back, do I genuinely feel things when I re-experience this story? As my mind was wrapped up in the world of Pokemon, I had a sneaking suspicion that the strange hold Pokemon had on me was more than just nostalgia. There was a piece of Pokemon story that reliably gave me an incredibly, indescribably powerful feeling every time I experienced it. At first, this powerful feeling did not make a whole lot of sense to me. When looking through the story of Pokemon, everything was ridiculously simple. What does the main character want? What is their goal? What drives every choice they make? Well, according to Pokemon Indigo League, it's this.
I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was.
And that's it. The whole goal of the games is to become the champion, the strongest Pokemon trainer there is. Why does every protagonist want this?
Because. Well, okay then.
As far as I know, the only real motivation that drives the main character of any Pokemon story is just to be good at Pokemon for the sake of being good at Pokemon. There really isn't anything else to the main character. In most Pokemon media, this is the extent of who the main character is. They want to be the very best because they just feel like it. They overcome challenges along the way and usually encounter some crazy bad guys as their journey progresses. However, their main motivation is not to beat the bad guys. That is just a big hiccup in the journey towards champion. In pretty much every single game, you beat the bad guys and then take on one or two more gyms before heading down Victory Road and challenging the Elite Four and then the champion. It's only after you become champion that the big adventure is finally over. So why does this ridiculously simple and honestly pretty bare bones story work so well? What about this is actually making me feel things? Well, the more and more I thought about it, the more and more the answer seemed to evade me. It couldn't be this stupidly simple story. It had to be something else. Maybe the emotions I feel have something to do with the magic system that Pokemon has built up. Little elemental animals battling it out with you catching and trading the pocket monsters. Well, Pokemon is not the only one to do this. There are a whole collection of examples we could use, but I want to point to my personal favorite video game of all time, Fossil Fighters. This little DS title was the first game I ever owned that actually told a really meaningful story that wasn't already connected to something outside of itself like Lego Star Wars, which is a masterpiece in its own right. I love the story of Fossil Fighters, but it is structured very differently than Pokemon. A lot of Fossil Fighters' emotional story is built off of your connection to a small number of characters, most notably Rosie and Duna. The game is not subtle in trying to build your emotional connection to these characters as you go on real, actual dates with them on this very idyllic tropical island, complete with a very romantic soundtrack, and save them or get saved by them in many different interesting ways. Rosie gets kidnapped by sharks, you get saved from imprisonment on a sunken pirate ship by Duna and her literal space gun. It's all pretty awesome, but the goal of the Fossil Fighter story changes pretty drastically in the middle. As you go along becoming a master fossil fighter, you discover some strange idols. It turns out that these idols are pretty important and are from a space computer that started all life on Earth. This space computer is built by reptilian aliens that can shapeshift into dinosaurs that you can then fight, but that's not the important part. Your whole goal in Fossil Fighters is to save humanity, first from these anime space dinosaurs, and then from this planet-eating tadpole. As you fight its brains in a Pokemon battle, the hot anime dinosaur woman, because who picks Rosie, turns to stone and you have to hip shake your heart out to save her life. I did not make any of that up. All of that is genuinely part of the story. But even though Fossil Fighters has a very similar magic system to Pokemon, commanding elemental creatures to fight other people who are doing the same thing, the emotional center of these stories is super super different. Fossil Fighters' main story has you, the main character, going on this crazy adventure to save the world and then to save the person you have grown emotionally attached to. Becoming the best fossil fighter is only a small stepping stone towards that goal. In Pokemon, the main story is to become the best Pokemon trainer, with the whole save the world plot only existing as a stepping stone towards that original goal. Clearly, structurally, one of these should work better than the other because of the powerful emotional connection to the characters within the story. And yet, Pokemon is the franchise that has completely dominated Fossil Fighters and, despite its simplicity, still pulls a very powerful emotion out of its audience. So it isn't just the magic system that is doing this. Pokemon's story is eliciting a genuine emotion out of me on a similar level to Fossil Fighters. However, Fossil Fighters is doing it through their characters and Pokemon is doing it through something else. So what is going on here? Why does Pokemon's story work so well, especially against a narrative that is carefully designed to elicit such a powerful feeling of connection, loss, and victory from your emotional investment into these characters? Who are you emotionally investing into in Pokemon? Even when there are zero characters to meaningfully connect with, Pokemon's story still works. How do they do this? Well, after thinking on this conundrum for an unhealthy amount of time, I finally figured it out. Pokemon doesn't work as well as it does because of its characters, its plot, or even its art style, but because they have mastered one of the biggest, most important aspects of character growth. Despite having such a simple goal for literally every character they have ever written, Pokemon, through its magic system and world building, tells you everything you need to know about where literally any character is on their journey towards becoming the best Pokemon trainer there ever was. In order to really understand how they pulled this off, we are going to have to jump into Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces. In 1949, Joseph Campbell came out with what he believed was the foundational common structure among all of storytelling everywhere. While he did point out several significant structural pieces that are quite common in storytelling, the claim that every story follows this exact structure is pretty hyperbolic. However, Joseph Campbell did point out several really interesting patterns that, over the course of many years, have developed into what is known as the hero's journey. For a quick overview, in the hero's journey, the protagonist starts off in what is called the known world. This is a very familiar place that the hero is often raised in. The hero knows the known world better than anywhere else because they haven't really been anywhere else. However, adventure calls and the hero eventually makes their way across the threshold into the unknown world. This place is brand new, unfamiliar, and filled with dangers and challenges that the hero must overcome. However, the hero is not alone. In order to take on these challenges, the hero is given some sort of supernatural aid. In Star Wars, it's the Force. In The Hobbit, it's the magic ring that turns Bilbo invisible. In basically any Greek myth, it's some gift from the gods. As the hero moves through the unknown world, it is their learning and mastery over this supernatural gift that allows them to overcome and conquer each challenge. This growth often directly correlates with their character development. As the hero learns the lessons they need and develops themselves in the story's thematic question, they better understand their supernatural gift and how to use it to overcome trial after trial. After the hero conquers their biggest challenge, they then go home, returning to the known world. But now the hero has changed, grown, learned, and developed into someone quite different. Their supernatural gift often stands as a literal reminder of the adventure and journey they just embarked on, and their mastery over that gift represents that change, growth, and learning the hero developed throughout the story. When applying Joseph Campbell's hero's journey to Pokemon, we can actually see a really interesting direct correlation between major elements of Campbell's theory and the way Pokemon tells its story. At the beginning of the story, the Pokemon protagonist starts their adventure in some small, insignificant town. Things are peaceful, but not really that interesting. However, there is some promise to the protagonist of a wider, more amazing world to discover. There are whispers and rumors of incredible places in Pokemon to meet and discover, and suddenly this tiny town feels even smaller. Thus, it is only reasonable that our main character eventually leaves this tiny town to venture off and discover what the world has to offer them. However, this protagonist does not go on this adventure alone. They are given a starter Pokemon, their supernatural aid, to help protect them as they venture off into the dangers and unknowns of this new world. The starter Pokemon is very small, very simple in design, and can only do so much with its meager power. However, you as its trainer have the feeling that this Pokemon, this personal partner on your journey, has the capacity to become something so much greater and grander than what it is now. It has the potential to evolve into something more. As you go off on your journey, you capture and collect many new, interesting, and increasingly more powerful Pokemon. As you hone your skills and better master this new world, your Pokemon grow bigger and stronger, literally evolving into something greater than what they were before. The Pokemon given to you at the beginning of your journey slowly becomes something powerful and mighty, and you are there every step of the way as you and your team conquer challenge after difficult challenge. Eventually, you make your way to the final test, a gauntlet of powerful opponents who have already mastered the world of Pokemon. Because of your strong Pokemon and your skill at commanding their incredible abilities, you are able to take down this terrifying mountain of a trial. After making your way through this entire unfamiliar world, you are now its champion. It's at this point that you look back at your team, the Pokemon that have been with you through thick and thin, that have had your back at every complication and turn. As you gaze at the powerful beasts they have become, you look back at yourself. Your Pokemon, your powerful team, are a reflection of your own growth and mastery over this world. Simply by looking at the Pokemon in your party, you can tell just how far you have come to achieving your goal of being the best Pokemon trainer there ever was. You can see the effect that your journey has had on you because you can literally see it in the Pokemon who have been with you through all of it. The power in your Pokemon is a literal reflection of the growth within yourself. That is the secret. That is why the story of Pokemon works so unbelievably well. You have a physical manifestation of your growth and mastery over the unknown world of Pokemon. Your development is literally expressed by the evolution of your Pokemon, both as individuals and as a cohesive team. What takes this idea from being an incredibly well implemented storytelling device and elevates it to the level of masterpiece is that the Pokemon owned by literally any character immediately clues you in on where they are on their personal journey. I can show you any screenshot from any Pokemon story where it shows the trainer with their Pokemon, and you instantly know where they are on their character development. That is not a piece of casual storytelling for children. That is a masterful expression and understanding of showing character growth through a magic system. There is no other story that I can name off the top of my head where you can immediately understand where literally any character is on their personal journey from nothing but a glance at the physical manifestation of the magic system. Avatar: The Last Airbender comes very close. You can tell where Aang is on his journey based on what elements he is using, but you can really only do that with the one character. In Pokemon, you can do that with literally everyone. The villain, the main character, every single side character, the random child that approaches you on the side of the street, your rival, your friends, the champion. The beautiful part of this magic system is that everyone within the world of Pokemon has access to that magic, and that as anyone grows and develops themselves, their Pokemon will naturally reflect that. This blew my mind because I finally understood why Pokemon kept coming back to me over and over again. In thinking about the Pokemon that I would realistically train and battle with, it would force me to reflect on my own growth and development as a person. As much as I would love to have a Luxray or an Aggron or a Komodo on my personal real-life team, I might not be at the end of my journey. I might still be off training for bigger and better things. I might be growing and learning in a new responsibility. I might be in the midst of discovering more about who I am and who I want to be. And that is where the genuine emotion comes in. As I listen to the music played when you prove yourself as the champion of the Pokemon world, it forces me to reflect on just how far I have come. Pokemon expertly understands the growth, learning, and development that comes from taking on challenges and overcoming impossible odds through the bonds of connection and friendship. That is the power of Pokemon and why it stands as a genuine masterclass in showing the journey of any character through the growth and power of their supernatural gift. Pokemon is incredibly special to a ton of people, and I, for one, cannot wait for the next time it causes me to reflect on my own personal journey by pondering on the Pokemon that would join me on my greatest adventures. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys really enjoyed that, and if you do, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a video. If you want me to prove myself as a writer and storyteller, I have my own story that I am working on currently. It is called The Night of Horrors: Darkness Rising, and you can check it out on my second channel, Chapter 1 Games. It took me a second to think of.